Hello, and welcome back to Money Honeys, Season 2, 2025. We are out here hustling, booked, busy, and alive. For better or for worse.
Woo! We're here.
I'm Chantel.
I'm Freddie.
And I'm Dev. Gals, let me paint a picture for you. It was a Sunday night. I was at home enjoying my rent, scrolling TikTok, and I came across a friend's post. Now, she's a friend who I've never met. Her name on TikTok is Femme Decal, and she's an artist that she's made a couple videos about redecorating her home, and they felt like a fever dream. And that's when I started following her. And so she started following me back, and that's why we're internet friends, okay? But at the top of the year, she posts something that's very out of character for her, which was a vulnerable TikTok about how her and her husband are in six figures of debt. Let's give it a watch.
My husband and I are in six figures of debt. As much as I wish that was just a clickbait TikTok hook, unfortunately it's not. My husband and I have over $100,000 of debt combined, not including our mortgage. Right now, in this moment, we have $344,000 of debt. $2,500 of that is medical debt. I shared earlier that I went through a pregnancy loss earlier this year, and DA America. Turns out that's super expensive. And the remaining $129,844, student debt. Now, you and Dave Ramsey may be asking yourselves, what kind of idiots are you?
Well, we are not Dave Ramsey, and we do not think that her and her husband are idiots.
No way. No, I think
No.
it's really interesting, and I think it's really commendable to be like, here's this big goal, here's how we're going to do it in a year, and fuck the rest.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I have to say, there's some debt looming on my end, so I'm hoping I can get some ideas just about strategy, their thought process, what's going on.
Love it. So obviously I had to invite Femme Decal, aka Sierra Wise, onto our show. Now, I've already mentioned she's an artist, a creator, and she makes insightful videos about the intersection of art and pop culture. She's also into DIY and home makeovers, which I really love her approach because she is realistic, a little chaotic, but very real. And while her home projects may be creative and freewheeling, Sierra has a plan with a capital P to get out of debt. She and her husband are motivated to pay off these six figures in a year, and she's coming on the show today to talk us through it. So welcome, Sierra.
Welcome.
Hey, Sierra.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on here. We like to talk about the money tea. So, on the show, we always talk openly and honestly about our finances and debt and money mistakes and all those things, which can be a little scary sometimes. So, did you feel any nerves about sharing the exact dollar amount of your debt with the world? And what motivated you to post on TikTok?
Well, I would say yes and no. I feel like people in my real life as a millennial, like my friends who I talk to, we compare student debt and our financial situation. Those conversations all feel very normal and very important to have, to know what are you doing? Because I feel like we're all struggling, but what are you doing? How bad are you struggling? How are you struggling? How can we kind of help each other? What's your strategy? And I feel like the culture of being hush hush about money doesn't really apply to millennials in my experience in my real life. But what was a little scary about posting it online is you see those other podcasts, you know what I'm talking about, not Money Honeys, never you guys, but where it's some white guy yelling at you for owning a credit card. And I'm I just don't know what algorithms this is gonna fall into.
Yeah.
So that part was scary, but the reaction has all been really positive, and it's been nice just to kind of find other people who have been on a similar path and talk through kind of debt payoff strategy and why we have debt in the first place.
In sharing things, and we know this, we're in sharing things online, even if your goal is just to really commiserate with people or to really just be open and transparent about real life experiences, it also opens you up to a lot of criticism or people questioning a lot of things about you. And so even if it feels really easy to be open about finances with friends, just very much commending you for being so willing and open to talk about it online, because you just open yourself up to the entire world, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think too, I think debt in general can be overwhelming. I think it all depends on your situation. If you have a one income or two income household, all of that. But I think it was so smart of you to just like put this out there, because it does sound like a big feat, but the way that you have approached it and like the strategy behind it, which we'll get into later, like I feel like it'll make people who even have like a little bit less debt, who feel overwhelmed, be like, okay, so this is possible, you know, like you just have to like truly get creative and find the loopholes, because that's all life is really just finding loopholes to get through.
That is so
Girl,
true.
I think we have a log line for this episode. Yep.
That is so true. Life is a loophole. So, in your post, Sierra, you mentioned that you have pretty much two categories of debt: medical and student loans, which, of course, feels very millennial of you, like all of us. So, talk to us about what y'all were doing to tackle debt prior to 2025.
Totally. And I just want to give your listeners like fair warning as well in talking through the kinds of debt we have. Student debt, which is like traumatizing in its own right. The medical debt that we have is from a pregnancy loss. So, just so that everyone's on the same page as we go into kind of this story, I want to give people a heads up if that's a sensitive topic for you. Take care while listening. I won't go into too much detail, but as someone who's lived through it, I know it's just important to be really mindful of that. But yeah, before we went into 2025, I think like a lot of millennials who have student debt, we had gotten into this situation. We knew that we had six figures of student debt, but it was kind of like this thought process we had of, yeah, we'll pay it down as aggressively as we can, and this is probably going to be something that we live with for the next 10 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of like on the back burner. It was one of those things that like definitely gave us anxiety, but it was almost like try not to think about it.
Yeah.
And then some nights in like the final moments before falling asleep, I would like turn over and see that my husband's got his phone up and he's staring at Nelnet on his phone and like looking at that number of how much student debt we have. And so we had to like put marriage rules in place of like no looking at Nelnet after 9 p.m., you know,
I
like
need to do that.
No Nelnet after 9.
no Nelnet after 9. I think that's
That's so
a good like
real.
law for all of us to live by.
No numbers after 9.
Yeah.
No numbers.
No numbers. No. I mean, you can only like spiral if you're looking at the
Yeah.
numbers after 9. So it was something that we were definitely cognizant of, that we were aware of. We had like talked about it really extensively. My husband had also like talked to me really extensively before, like even when we were dating, talking about how he had wanted to go to physical therapy school. He had wanted to take out this debt, and just wanting me to be really like fully consenting to entering into a relationship and like merging our finances, knowing that this was in his future and this is what he was planning for. One thing that I didn't mention in my TikTok video, because there's just not enough time to like give the full context, is that the average cost of becoming a physical therapist in the US is about $97,000. So even, I know, I see your faces, it's so much money.
Yeah, shit.
And my husband, his parents are immigrants from Mexico. They're the most wonderful people on planet Earth, and I love them. And they came to the US chasing the American dream. And my husband and his siblings are birthright citizens. And so my sweet parents in law raised 4 children on the income of a landscaper and a housekeeper.
Oh my goodness.
And which
4.
is just an incredible feat in and of itself. And my husband tells the story of when he decided that he wanted to go into healthcare. And he was 7 years old and he was sitting in a doctor's office translating for his mom as she had a postpartum care visit from her doctor, because there was a language barrier between the provider and her. And in that moment, as my husband's sitting there at 7 years old, he thought to himself, like, well, this is silly. Like, why doesn't the doctor know how to speak Spanish so they can communicate with my mom? And he decided, well, when I grow up, I'll just become a doctor so that I can help the people who speak Spanish. And he held that dream, and he like fought his way all the way through school. He like beat all the statistics and the odds for somebody who had come from his socioeconomic and life background. I still remember we were dating and he was working as a landscaper with his dad to save money for school. And he was out literally plowing a field as he got a call from the recruiter letting him know that he had been accepted into graduate school. And he stepped away and called me, and then he went and told his dad, and he knew that like he had done it for his parents. Like this was their dream. Like they came to this country so their kids could like have a chance. And so that's always been like my guiding star when we think about our debt, is that
I'm so sorry to cut you off, Sierra, but is someone cutting onions?
I know. I'm literally, I'm like teary eyed. My God, what a powerful and moving story. And I mean, he just honestly, your husband sounds like an amazing man, and the support that
Hmm.
you give him too, I'm sure is like just been so impactful for him. And I mean, what a beautiful, powerful story.
Yes, I just had to acknowledge that. And you told it so beautifully. And you can just hear how proud you are of him just in the way
Mhm.
that you speak about him. And I'm happy. I never met the man. And this is my first time meeting you, but I'm really happy for you that you like both found each other. Truly.
Mhm.
Also, what's his name? So we can like bless it. What's his name?
Emilio.
Emilio.
I love that name.
We love Emilio.
We love
Yeah.
him.
I love
This
him
is
so
an
much.
Emilio Stan account.
Pro
Yeah, like
Emilio.
I don't stand many men, but I'll stand Emilio every day.
You better. You better.
Yeah. No,
Emotional.
he's the best. He's the best. And even like we've taken on additional debt, which I can get into as well. We're taking on additional debt this year, which I know feels really counterintuitive, but he's doing a fellowship program so he can specialize in women's health because it's so underfunded. And again, it's something that like they need native Spanish speakers to like support. And like I get so annoyed when I see these, podcast bros out there saying like no one should have student debt and this is ridiculous and like why do millennials have all this debt? And I'm just going, well, then I hope you're never in a car crash. You need to be rehabilitated because like the healthcare workers who are going to be caring for you have student debt. And like there's plenty of professions out there that like the only possible like mode of entry is student debt. And for my husband at least, like sure, I'm sure there are people out there who have found like creative solutions to get themselves through graduate school for physical therapy or for other like expensive programs without taking on the weight of student debt. But for a variety of reasons, that wasn't possible for my husband through this process. And a part of that is like really classist for people to say, like, oh, you should only go to school if you can pay for it without debt, because my husband didn't have like that financial security or like generational wealth that would allow him to do that. And I don't think that that means that he shouldn't be a healthcare provider. I think that that's really foolish. And so
Yeah.
it's felt worthwhile to go into this situation for us.
Right. And also, like, just to reiterate, like, this man, he went in state too. Like, it's not like he decided to go to a Northeastern school. Like, he didn't went in state. I'm sure he probably applied for all the grants, all the funding. And then I think a lot of times, as somebody who has student debt too, people criticize us because we didn't, quote unquote, have jobs while we were in college to pay it off. And there's absolutely, especially in a program for like physical therapy or medicine or anything like that, where the workload is already, monumental. The idea of also balancing potentially a part-time or full-time job that's probably not going to pay you well because you're a student. It's just, there's no way. There's no way. There's no way.
There's absolutely no way. And like even before my husband went to school, he worked as a landscaper during the summers because that was like higher paying for him to save up. But then you have to have a certain number of clinical hours to get into your program. And those clinical hours are working as an aide. He was making $10 an hour. It's like he had to work that job to get the hours to go to graduate school. But by working that job, it also meant that he couldn't like save up for graduate school. So it feels like an impossible
Oh,
Yeah.
situation with how the system's set up,
Yeah.
but it's just the game you have to play.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
y'all got in, obviously y'all met in college. That's what I'm gleaning from this conversation, which is beautiful. We love. But then obviously you graduated and then you both entered the workforce. Talk to us about what that was like, because obviously those first couple of years out of college, you're broke. You're dead broke. You're trying to establish yourself. How did you, in like the lead up at the beginning of your quote unquote adulthood, how did you kind of land where you are now?
That's such a great question. And my husband obviously had gone to undergrad for like exercise science. And so he was working that job at like $10 an hour doing landscaping on the weekends. We eloped like shortly after I graduated from college. So my husband was working his job $10 an hour. He was doing landscaping during the summers to save up a little bit of money. He had been accepted into a graduate program at that point, but hadn't yet started when we eloped. And when we got married, I mean, my husband likes to joke because this is true. Like when we got married, neither of us had a job. It was just like, sweet, we're just going to get married. We know that's the next step. He was starting graduate school. I was starting my first job like out of college, which then 2020 hit. And so I got furloughed like immediately thereafter and bounced around between a few different positions, just trying to make ends meet. And we exited the pandemic with my husband finishing graduate school, and I was working a job where I was making like $40,000 a year, and he accepted his first position out of graduate school at $75,000 a year. And so combined, even if we had put every single cent that we earned, like not a cent to Uncle Sam, not a cent to like anything else,
Yeah.
we were in more debt at, $120,000 of debt than we could have paid off. And it was just kind of a situation where the gravity of that definitely hit us. And we both realized it's like, okay, let's make some changes. Let's see what we can do. My husband was able to get promoted at his job up to making $90,000 a year. I was able to pivot into tech, mostly, partially because of luck, frankly, and partially because I had really good people in my network. And I went from making $40,000 a year to 110, which I know is a huge privilege.
We love that though. We love that for you.
Yeah,
Love getting money.
gotta make it work how you can make it work. And so on paper, it just felt like, okay, like now we're kind of more responsible, quote unquote. We bought our first house, which ended up being quite a money pit for us, thus the chaotic home renovation started as well. But on paper, it's like, okay, like we have good jobs, we're making good money. My husband started doing home health on the side to bring in a little extra money to kind of throw towards our student debt. And we lived in that state for just a couple of years, just kind of like going through the motions. I have a good job. He has a good job. We're putting money away. Student debt was like paused, like repayment was paused under the Biden administration. So we were kind of putting money into savings and just thinking it's like, okay, well, let's see if student debt forgiveness happens. Let's like hold off. And meanwhile, that number at like $130,000 just kind of, because, there's interest and things that come with that we had about $130,000 of debt just sitting there. And it was frozen. It wasn't acquiring interest, but the number also wasn't going down. And we just continued to like put money into savings and think through what are our options, what's our strategy for repayment.
I didn't know physical therapists only made $75,000 to enter the job. It feels like such a knowledge specific position, something that you have to go into school for. And I guess I assumed in any job in the medical field, you make bank, but $90K? That's it?
Yeah, I might be, well, that's like standard across the US. Like that's about how much a physical therapist entering the workforce can make. That's actually considered in a lot of places like a pretty good gig.
Sure.
If you can make 75 coming out of grad school, which I know sounds crazy, but the reality is that a lot of the money in medicine is fueled through pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies that are pouring money in. And because physical therapy doesn't rely on prescribing and pharmaceuticals, even though they're also doctors and they also have extensive medical knowledge and have to go to medical school and, pay a bunch of money to enter into the industry, the costs or like the cost to go to school versus the amount of money you can make actually in the field feels pretty unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now that we know the full picture of Sierra's situation, we're going to take a short capitalism break, get our ads going, take a second to refresh your beverages, y'all. And when we come back, Sierra's going to talk to us about the formation of her plan. Stick with us.
Welcome back, cuties. We're here with Sierra Wise, the woman of the hour, the woman of the hour. She is taking us on a journey through her thinking about how she's going to eradicate her and her husband's debt in 2025.
And we're all about it. Like, let's jump into it because I'm hoping to get some tips, learn some skills. Sierra Wise is very wise, so let's go.
So, Sierra, can you describe to us the moment when you decided you had to pivot and change tactics? What was that like?
Yeah, totally. So I don't know if anyone here is an astrology girly. I don't know if there's any. Perfect. So I like to joke, of course, I like to joke that this big pivot happened at the end of 2024 for us, which was my Saturn return. So really, I have my Saturn return to thank for really upending my life and deciding together with my husband, Amelia, that we needed to have a far more aggressive strategy in place for our debt payoff. So where we left off, we had this debt kind of looming in the background, but we had good jobs and like, we were homeowners and on paper we were being responsible. And it was like, okay, well, we'll just take like a moderate debt payoff strategy and just kind of put this on the back burner and like figure it out as we go along. And last summer I found out that I was pregnant. And that was something that like we had planned for. We knew that like we wanted to be parents. That was on the horizon for us. And again, like on paper, we're checking all the boxes. You know, it's
Right.
like we have good jobs, we have good insurance, you know, we have like stable housing, which obviously we're so grateful to have. And yeah, we also had student debt, but you know, we would figure it out with time. And we had looked at the numbers and it's like, yeah, it might be tight on our budget for a while, but we can make this all work. And I think it's one thing to like feel that way hypothetically, and it's another thing to like be looking at that clear blue pregnancy test and have it say I'm pregnant and just go, oh shit, you know, like this is really going to be my life. Is going to be bringing another like human being into this world while also trying to pay down this debt. And like there was just a lot of unknown in that, but we were excited and we were, you know, going to make it work. We were going to figure it out. And this is a part that needs a trigger warning. So if anyone is sensitive who's listening towards pregnancy loss, skip ahead just a couple minutes, and I think you can get the gist that I did end up losing this pregnancy. But what I didn't anticipate was the financial fallout from that experience, because you go to your first like OBGYN appointment, or at least I did, and they gave me a cost breakdown of like, hey, this is how much it's going to cost if you have vaginal delivery. This is how much it's going to cost if you have a C-section. And what I'd never expected was that by losing that pregnancy at 10 weeks, that the total cost of my medical care would double what they had quoted me for a C-section, which just felt,
Wow.
Wow. I had
I
no
had
idea.
no idea. I had no idea until like we lived through it. But I found out I was pregnant. And then I started bleeding like a few weeks in, and I'd already had like a blood test because I'd had some concern with some spotting, and I'd had an ectopic pregnancy in the past, which is when, you know, the
Yeah.
pregnancy implants outside of the uterus. That's a whole different story for a different episode, but that happened the same week that Roe got overturned, and I had an IUD at the time. So that was like a life threatening, really scary situation, especially
Oh
as a
my
woman in a
God.
red
God.
state. So because that had happened to me in the past, they were just being really like diligent and really like doing a lot of testing for me through my pregnancy process. So I don't want
Sure.
to, you know, I know it's an abnormal situation to be going in for testing like 4 weeks pregnant, but just because of my history, that's what was recommended. Anyway, so I was diagnosed with having a miscarriage in the ER at 4 weeks, and then they had me come back for a follow up a week later, and they were able to detect a heartbeat, which was so freaky. And they're like, hey, it looks like you're actually not having miscarriage. You're having a hematoma, which is just basically like a massive bleed. And they said, like, but we think that the pregnancy could be viable. But then all of a sudden I'm jumping back and forth to all of these like specialist visits. I ended up going to the ER 2 more times. Um, and it was just a lot. And then eventually, you know, they thought that things were stabilized and things were looking good, and I ended up just having a spontaneous miscarriage anyway at 10 weeks, which obviously was really emotionally painful to go through all of
Yeah.
that.
Of
The
course.
back and forth, the
Yeah.
emotional roller coaster.
Totally, totally. I mean, like pregnancy loss is hard regardless of the circumstance, but also like just being on this roller coaster of like you're losing the pregnancy, no you're not,
Yeah.
everything's fine, you know, it's like
Yeah.
just felt like such turmoil. Ended up, you know, once again, just have to stan Emilio because he was just such a rock through the whole process. We were supposed to be in LA for our 5 year anniversary, wedding anniversary, on the day that I actually had a miscarriage instead. And so it was just like real turmoil in a lot of different ways for us. But then on top of that, my body wasn't able to like fully pass the pregnancy on its own.
Yeah.
And so they did a few rounds of like essentially like abortion medication, which I was really fortunate to be able to have access to in a red state. And that wasn't enough. And so I'm also working, you know, a full time job during all of this, and luckily had really supportive people at my work who were aware of my situation. But just also, you know, that's like just shitty as well. And just like additional like pressure of feeling like, even though I know logically my coworkers totally understand, they're happy to pick up, you know, I work in tech and things move fast. And it's like, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm like letting the team down. And my husband's work was less flexible with him about like letting him like take me to appointments and things like that. So I ended up needing a DNC. And that decision was made right after Donald Trump won the election. And so I remember like my husband dropped me off at the hospital. My best friend was going to pick me up. And I walked in and gave them my insurance information. I have United Health, which again, not to make everything so political, but I handed them my United Healthcare card.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget like the woman looking at me and going, yeah, so this will be about $4,000. Do you want to pay that on a credit card? Do you have a check? And I've already paid thousands of dollars towards like pregnancy
Testing.
loss care and
Yeah.
testing and everything that I've been
Specialists,
through.
like,
Yeah. And I work in tech. And so I actually have really good insurance. And I just burst into tears. They're playing Fox News in the waiting room and people are cheering over like, like abortion restrictions because Trump had won. And I'm just going, okay, first off, can you turn that garbage off the TV? And two, like, how can this be possible? And so I'm in tears. I stepped away. I called Emilio, my husband. I'm like, I just need you to come pick me up. Like, let's just wait this out and see if my body can pass this on its own. Like, we can't pay another $4,000. Like, we've already paid so much. And luckily, he's just so much cooler under pressure than I am. And he's like, I'd rather be in medical debt than like have you go septic. Like, don't, like, this just doesn't matter. Like, we will figure this out. Like, please just get the care that you need. And at that point, it really felt like rock bottom in a lot of ways, like financially, of just like waking up from surgery and just feeling like, okay, I am in thousands of dollars of debt for a pregnancy that wasn't viable in the end. And I've just been on this huge emotional roller coaster that really radicalized me, and finances are political. That's just the way it is.
Yes.
And I felt what it felt like to imagine like raising a child in an environment of that level of financial stress. And while I know that I do want parenthood in my future, it felt like we had opened this window, although it wasn't the path that we wanted to be on, where we could make some radical changes and take more control of our finances and our life. And so we sold our house and we bought a new house, and we had the intent of moving into that place, which would have a big part of the motivation there was that where we were living before did not have good access to hospitals and healthcare. And so we bought a new place in Salt Lake. We were excited to be moving into it. And instead, I asked my husband, it's like, well, what if we just rented this out and we went on what we're calling a year of pain or a sufferfest to see if we can just make really radical changes and get out of debt, because there's so much that felt out of control. But what could be in our control is taking a really aggressive approach and at least eliminating the Nelnet stress of laying in bed at 9 p.m. each night and like looking at our student debt. And so that's what we've decided to do. And I know it's crazy and it's not what I would necessarily recommend to anyone, but for us, it made a lot of sense. But it required really hitting the ultimate financial stress to get there.
You keep saying that this is a crazy idea, but now that we know all the context, this sounds like the most sane and reasonable decision. Like, there's nothing crazy about it. Like, you've looked at your situation, you've assessed what you have control over and what you don't, and you're deciding to take a year to, like, take back control, which I think is amazing. I know you're calling this the Year of Pain because it's a funny title, and it's probably going to be painful in a lot of regards. But if you had to break down this year of pain into 3 descriptive words that are not painful, what would they be and why about your strategy?
Oh, that's such a good question. The first word that comes to mind is radical.
Love that.
Radical, intentional, and controlled. Those would probably be my three words for this year.
See, that's not crazy. Those aren't crazy words.
Mm-hmm.
I think like when you know the full story, it's not crazy. I think like for our friends and family who are like, sweet, you guys are buying a place in Salt Lake, like you'll be closer to us. And then we're like, psych, we're going to rent it out. And my husband took a travel job, which pays really well, but it means that like we'll be moving every 12 weeks. And like we're just going to do a no spend year and we're going to knock out 6 figures of debt. Like when you hear that, it's like, whoa, are these guys okay? Like maybe they should just try going to therapy. Like I know they've been through a lot, but I'm like, no, I think we just need to like take control.
No, I love it.
Therapy costs money.
Right.
Therapy
does
costs
cost money. I
money.
love my therapist. Meg
Yeah.
is the best, but she is expensive.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Love her.
like truly echoing what Dev said, like none of it sounds irrational. It actually sounds incredibly rational. And when you've been through such impactful life events, especially involving loss, it makes you realize how much is out of your control. And it's just like it can be a really big lesson in just like letting go, because you're like, well, these things are just things. You just really find what's actually important to you. And so, like, the idea of it feels like, I don't know. It's like, yes, a year of no spend and maybe a year of pain or suffering or however you feel like calling it. But I'm like, to me, it almost feels like you're just gamifying your debt, which is like kind of it's just a really interesting way to do it and a really interesting way to look at it. And also just thank you for being so open and sharing all of that with us. I mean, your story
Mm-hmm.
has made me very emotional in so many different parts. And so I just feel, I'm sure I speak for all of us, where we just feel really lucky to have you on this episode right now. Sidebar.
Okay. Can you help us understand some of the numbers here, just like more specifically? So, when you rent out your home, how much money will that generate?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're not renting out our house won't completely cover the mortgage and the costs of our house, which we are totally fine with because at the end of the day, what we really want is really good renters who will take good care of this place because we
Mm-hmm.
want to live here, and we also, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of an ethical and a moral dilemma for me, but I know that there is like a cost of living crisis and Utah's been like hit really hard with that with housing. And I don't want to be like a scummy landlord who's like,
Mm-hmm.
just taking advantage of someone else who might be in a difficult situation while we're in a difficult situation. And so, with interest rates where they are right now, and with this house that we purchased, our mortgage is about $3,400 a month. And that's not including like utilities or anything like that. And after we rent out the house, we'll be able to get about $2,800 a month with what we'll be charging for the house. So we'll have about $600 plus any utilities, which we're just going to cover because there's a mother-in-law apartment at this house, which we were always planning on renting out for, like $800 a month. Um, so that's already rented. We'll rent the upstairs for 2,000. It's a lot more space, it's a lot more bedrooms and bathrooms, things like that. And so, yeah, it won't totally cover the mortgage. We're planning on just working that into our budget for the year of making sure that we're covering the rest of that. But we're also not going to ask them to like pay utilities and split it. That just seems like a headache with like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
two different living spaces. And so we'll cover that. And I'm expecting about $800 a month of our budget to be going towards just maintaining our home here in Utah. And then on the road, I can speak to our first location where we're going to be. My husband's already there. We'll be in Joseph, Oregon. Super exciting. I know, where everyone wants to live. Actually, I do think it's going to be really cool. But I had never heard of this town beforehand. My husband,
Joseph. Ooh.
Joseph.
It's
Ah.
interesting that it's just like a first name, where it's like, I'm in Stephen, Nebraska.
Maybe that should be our theme for the year. Like, we're only going to name places.
Yeah.
We got
Yeah.
to find somewhere.
Yeah. Good Christian names.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So my husband's there right now, and I'll be joining him once I just tie up loose ends here and get the house rented and things like that. And we're paying about $650 in rent where he's at right now, and so which is a pretty great deal. We'll have roommates. It's like it's not gonna. Yeah, I mean we're kind of going back to college, but
Yeah.
we're not going for luxury. There's another home that we could move into that he's looked at, which is not furnished, which would be hilarious because all of our furniture and all of our earthly possessions are in storage right now. And so I'm just like, sweet, like we'll just get a mattress on the floor and like a folding table and some chairs. Like we're just gonna be roughing it for the
Yeah.
next year, but that's all we need. And I think that going through this experience too, it's really kind of helped us recalibrate like what matters. And it's like
Mhm.
we're doing this for 1 year and we're not going for luxury. It's just all that matters is that we have each other and that we're on the same team in gamifying this debt, like you said, and just getting out from under the situation. So those are going to be our primary expenses is around like housing costs, right? And then of course we're fractioning in, we're still putting money into our 401ks. We want to be responsible. We're still maxing out our Roth IRAs because we want to be responsible. And then we have, other miscellaneous expenses as well, of course, like groceries and gas. But when we crunch the numbers, we're planning on putting about 75% of all of our income for the year directly into student debt.
I think that's so cool. I think that's so
Mm-hmm.
cool. Also, I think this is low key going to be an adventurous year for y'all. Not only because you guys are going to be roughing it, but you're going to be traveling. So it's never going to be like the same setting. You're going to be kind of backpacking around America.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we do our next check-in, I have no idea where we'll be. And like, I feel like a former version of me would be so stressed out by that idea. And I just feel calm. And that's why I know it's like aligned for us because I'm like, yeah, this is going to be fine. Like we've already been through what feels like the worst last
Hmm.
year. And so if the worst we're dealing with is that we're sleeping on a mattress on the floor with our dogs, like just in their beds off to the side and like eating off of a folding table and just driving our Subaru Impreza all over the United States, I just don't care.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just like it's all for the greater good. And so
You're gonna feel
that's
so good after this year. Like truly, the reward in the end is gonna be worth it 10 times over. Like I'm so excited for you guys.
Question about the pay increase because my cousin was a travel nurse for a while. She has since kind of now settled down and is nursing at a hospital in Ohio. But she mentioned that, as a travel nurse, you get to make bank. It's kind of a thankless job, but you make way more money on your monthly income than you would if you just were at a hospital. Is that the same for your husband in physical therapy? Is he seeing a pay increase?
yes. So, but I have to warn you that it sounds like we're committing tax fraud or that I'm recruiting you into an MLM when I explain how it works. So just like follow me. I promise this is legal. I promise it's legal. We've like talked to a lot of people who know more than us because when we were first hearing about it, Emilio had, coworkers and like friends of his who he had gone to grad school with who had done this before for debt payoff. And when they start describing it, it's like, well, that doesn't sound right. Like, I don't know what you mean
Yeah.
by that. But basically, how it works is a lot of your pay that they give you is actually in the form of a tax free stipend. And so you're only taxed, Amelia will get taxed on about like $50,000 for the year. But then he'll be making closer to like 150, and the rest of that is paid out in like a tax-free stipend. And the reason why these programs exist is because there are areas all over the United States like Joseph or
Joseph.
yeah, where they have a shortage of healthcare workers. And so these hospitals and clinics apply to be a part of these programs where they're able to pay healthcare workers in this way with like the tax program of it being an incentive to get people to come out. And so I know it really does sound like it's like, Sierra, you can't make $150,000 a year and only pay taxes on 50K. Like you are going to go to federal prison. But we've done a lot of research. Turns out totally above board. And it is like a thankless way to get out of debt and to earn more money. And it does mean that like every 12 to 13 weeks, you are on the road going somewhere else and you have some control over where that might be, but not total control. But at the end of the day, for us, it's just really worth it. It's worth it to like just have a year of pain, year of a sufferfest, so that we at the end of it can have that reward of feeling like, okay, we can move back to Utah, we can be reconnected with our community, we can move back into this house that we bought and know that we don't have six figures of debt like looming over us, waiting to just like crush our financial future.
Honestly, I am so thankful that a program like that exists. And I want
Mhm.
programs like that to, I mean, and maybe they do, but like I want programs along those lines to exist for so many other professions as
Yeah.
well, where I'm like teachers, that's how they should be paid, regardless if they're travel teachers or stationed teachers or whatever, but so like I'm just like I'm actually very thankful that a program like that exists and that you're able to be a part of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I agree. Teachers should all make like $1 million a year and not have to pay taxes. I feel like that's the rules, but unfortunately, I'm not in charge.
Right.
But I
I mean,
don't I don't know if there are other programs like that for other professions. I hope that there are because this is going to really bless our family to let us get out of this debt situation that we're in.
Really fast, I have a question. What is your favorite struggle meal? Because I feel like you guys are going to be having a lot of struggle dinners this year.
That is such a good question. So my husband Emilio, one of the things that he started doing, he called me just like out of the blue and he's like, I'm gonna go vegan for 6 months and just see if I like it. He's like, but like financially it makes sense. He's like, he has high blood pressure and he's done some research. He's like, this could help my blood pressure. So it's kind of like a health experiment for him as well as like just hey, this is cheaper. And so we've been eating just a lot of like tofu scrambles, just scrambling up some tofu with whatever vegetables you have in the fridge and eating that on a tortilla. And it's like, would some people think that's gross? Sure, but I don't
No.
care because for us, it's like, it's good, it's balanced, I mean, tofu is so affordable. You can buy like a big pack at Aldi for almost nothing. So
Yeah.
that's our struggle meal at the moment. But I also have ADHD, so I tend to like go through a food hyperfixation. I'll eat it like 3 times a day for like 4 weeks and then never eat it again. So that's just the space I'm in right now.
I'm gonna send you
You're
some
speaking
recipes.
Chantel's language.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
gonna send you some recipes because I'm vegan too, and it's like it is way cheaper. Like, and I have a recipe for tofu scramble that I do that's so good. And literally, like my plan after we record this is to make a tofu scramble, put it on a tortilla, a chickpea tortilla, so it has more protein. I was like, I'm gonna make a little tofu scramble burrito. So you're speaking my language.
That's amazing. Send me all the recipes. Yeah, because
I
we're new
will.
to this. But yeah, I mean, from a financial standpoint, it makes sense. But it's also just like, why not? Like, we're already like changing so many things about our life right now. Like, why not
Yeah.
just like try some new things and really limit like our eating out and just really. But I mean, where are we gonna go eat out in Joseph, Oregon? So it's also like
Especially if you're
we're gonna be
vegan.
away from our like we're gonna be away from our friends. We're gonna be like away from kind of like the normal places that we go spend money and just totally outside of our routine. And I think in a way that makes it easier.
So we're recording this episode on January 26th. We're almost done with January. How has it been going so far?
Yeah. So my husband likes to joke that like the whole year is going to be our year of pain, but he says that the first 3 months are the most painful because we're living apart right now while he gets his job started, while I tie up these loose ends. We've also just had to sink some money into our new house, not nearly as bad as it was in the house we were at previously, but just things like switching out locks and like replacing some flooring and doing a little bit of paint and stuff just to get it really safe and secure and ready for the people who are going to be renting it.
You're glazing over the fact that you're ripping up carpet right now in
Oh my
your
gosh,
kitchen.
yeah. There's
They have
carpet in the kitchen.
Excuse?
Isn't that so crazy? And like, okay, this is just a quick sidebar, but we bought this house. It's in 1958. It has like such good bones. It's been so well taken care of. The folks who we bought it from are in their 90s. They are the second owners of the house. The people who built it only lived here 6 years. So pretty much the original owners who like sold it to us. And they are just sweet little angels. I love them and we're going to take such good care of this house. But it has like original hardwood throughout the entire house that I guess was covered up by shag carpet that they ripped up just to sell at like the advice of their real estate agent. And this sweet woman who's 95, who was showing me her house when we were like gonna buy it, she was like, yeah, there used to be like carpet throughout. She's like, to cover up these gross floors. She's like, but you can like put carpet back in once you buy it if you want carpet. I'm just like, okay, like, but they had remodeled the kitchen. And so at some point they took the hardwood out of the kitchen and they put in industrial carpet instead, which just feels so crazy in a kitchen. I know.
Wow.
We
I
listen and
know.
we don't judge.
We listen and we
Mhm.
don't judge. And I love Lucine. So, Lucine, if you hear this, I don't know if you know what a podcast is, but I love you and I trust your vision. But I will not be putting carpet in the kitchen. We will be replacing that with something else.
Yeah, I've heard carpet in the bathroom. I've heard it, I've seen it. I don't think I've heard carpet in the kitchen though. I think this is a first.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I have 2 dogs. And like, if the dogs were ever in the kitchen, they were like sniffing down in the carpet in a way that really gave me anxiety. I'm like, what do you smell in here?
Yeah.
We got to get it out.
I think that's what I'm going to name my mixtape, Carpet in the Kitchen.
Yes.
I'm into it, actually.
It's so good. We got plastic on the sofa, carpet in the kitchen.
I kind of love that.
Yeah. Well, it's time for a beverage break. When we come back, Sierra is going to tell us about the response to her year of pain from the people in her life and people on the internet. So, so don't leave us. That would only hurt my feelings. Okay.
I just want to note we're at 46 minutes. How are we doing on time? Dev, mainly for
We
you.
are almost done
Okay.
with this up.
Okay.
I'm gonna run to the restroom really fast.
Okay.
Okay.
Carpet in the kitchen.
Isn't that so crazy?
It's really crazy.
But it's so crazy. And we found in
What
the
color?
like industrial gray. Like imagine like the carpet that you would see in
In a
like an
law
elementary school. Yeah,
yeah.
of like the kind of carpet that a kid could puke on and like is probably like the easiest to clean up for carpet, you know? That's what we're rocking with. And I honestly started to rip it up because I just couldn't deal. And I just am like, I'm just gonna tear this up. I don't know what's underneath. Like, let's just tear it up. And
How's it been? How are you doing mentally?
I honestly like feel like kind of traumatized by the
Yeah,
whole
you
thing.
look
It's
like
kind of
you're traumatized.
it's kind of made me feel like I'm like, I don't think I'm ever gonna have carpet in any home that I ever own ever again after like seeing what is under carpet. It's just too gross.
Yeah, this is a traumatizing conversation.
It's spooky. No, it's spooky because like you can't like throw it in the washing machine. You know what I mean? You can't like clean under it. So
Anyway,
just don't put carpet in your kitchen. That's the moral of the story.
I mean, yeah,
No.
definitely that. Yeah. But I'm like, I think I might transfer to Ruggables so I
Mhm.
I think that's
can
smart. Yeah.
throw it in the wash.
All right, we're back. I'm Sierra, and we're talking about my plan to get out of debt. Now, I have a question for y'all.
Ooh.
Would you do a year of pain to get out of debt?
Absolutely. I basically have done
I
a year of
would.
pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all kind of, because even as you're telling your story, I'm like looking around at my condo and I'm like, do I just move back to Virginia for a year, have someone rent this out, and then like not have to pay? Because I have a lot of friends from college who are living at home, even like post marriage, right? Like, so one of my best friends, her sister did the same thing, her older sister did the same thing, but their dad has like a townhouse that he rents, and he has been living in, like, he lives in the basement and has given first her older sister and her new husband the rest of the house to like save and like stack money so that they can buy their own. Then after they moved out, he moved back into like the rest of his home. And now that her younger sister, who's my best friend, she got married in 2022 and she did the exact same thing. Her and her husband moved into their dad's house. He moved back down to the basement and they've just been stacking. They have a new baby. And so they've just been like stacking money, saving money so that they can, get their own house. And I'm just like, wow, like this is such an amazing situation and an amazing hack if it works for you in terms of like, the city that you're in is good for your career, or even like your career doesn't matter where you are. Like, and if you have like a good relationship with your parents, there's so many factors that like goes into it. But I'm like, wow, like I would absolutely be willing to do something like that to get into like a good financial standing where there's just like less stress. Because as we all know, finances can truly, truly fuck with your mental health. It can fuck with your relationship. And it just feels so ridiculous. It's like, why
Yeah.
is this outside factor like affecting us in such horrible ways, which we all know capitalism and like it's America is kind of built so that you are completely dependent on money and finances to live a life of quality, as I guess you could say. But yes, all that to say, I would definitely live a year of pain to like get into a good financial spot. I love money. I love feeling secure. And, transparently, I just haven't felt that. And I feel about 3 years. I haven't really felt that. It's been a bit of a struggle, like working for myself, figuring out, gigs and freelance opportunities and just always hustling
Our
and
industry
still
has
feeling
been
like,
in the
yeah,
toilet.
it's been bad. And so, I feel like now more than ever, I would absolutely just like take it on the chin, do a year of pain just to like get into a good spot. Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Also, I think like what you described, Fred, about, moving dad into the basement. Like
It's a finished basement. It's like its
it,
own, like it has a, yeah.
that's the spot. That's the spot. Don't worry, he loves it.
He
Whatever.
does.
But that's almost like a different kind of flavor of generational wealth. He's got this townhouse. He's willing to share it
Mm-hmm.
so that his, you know, progeny is able to extend themselves and build themselves up in the world. And yeah, it's not like the traditional idea of generational wealth where parents write you a check.
That's
It's a
true.
different kind that is, I think, more beautiful because then he
It's
gets to
so
be a part
beautiful.
of their lives a little
Yeah,
bit more and like see their babies as they're being raised from like babyhood to toddlerhood and stuff. And
absolutely.
I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool.
It's great.
Mm-hmm.
We love Carlos. Carlos
Carlos is in the
is,
basement.
Carlos.
Basement
Carlos is like, I'll just
Carlos.
do my stuff.
yes,
That's another name for your mixtape, Carlos's Basement.
Yeah.
Carlos's basement.
Basement.
Exactly.
Carpet in the kitchen. Carlos in the basement.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, like I echoing what you said, Deb. I think that's like a really beautiful thing to do, and the fact that he can just go upstairs, see the brand new baby. It's like that must also just
Mm-hmm.
be so special for everyone involved, for him, for the new parents, for the baby.
Mm-hmm.
It's so powerful, and like not to make light of, I did a year of pain last year, but it's like last year was really a year of rebuilding for me, and like I had to start from scratch in a lot of ways, and so I was very like buckled down and had to gamify my own spending or lack thereof in order to get myself to a place that was actually feeling secure and feeling like, okay, I can handle financially what's in front of me and feeling good about it. So I am very excited for you. I didn't do the things that you and your husband are doing, but I had my own, just in a different font, in a different flavor.
So what about the people in your life, Sierra? What's the feedback that you've been getting from this year of pain, struggle fest? What are people saying?
We've been surprised by how supportive everyone's been through this process in our real life. Like, I think even I was a little nervous about my job's always been remote, but the company that I work for is based out of Utah. And so I know that they've liked having me close, that I can pop into headquarters when they need me for something. When I talked to my boss to explain, like, hey, could I like be really truly 100% remote for a year? And these are the motivations why. I feel like when I walk people through it of this is the situation that we're in and this is how it could bless our lives if we do this, everyone's been pretty supportive. I think that at first they're a little puzzled, of like, what do you mean you guys just bought a place in Salt Lake and you're gonna not live in it, and like, what do you mean you don't know where you're gonna live every 3 months? And then when we explain the program and we explain the why, people just get it because we can either live kind of indefinitely with moderate amounts of pain and a lot of financial anxiety, or we can decide that we're going to have 1 year of a lot of discomfort, but without the anxiety because we have a plan. And when we lay it out like that for people, everyone's just been really supportive.
Wow. I
Thank
mean,
God.
yeah. Did you have to kind of like, do you have like an outline for yourself? Like at this point, I'm sure that you like can say it off the top naturally when people are asking like, what motivated you guys to like take this step X, Y, and Z. But like when you went in to like ask your boss or explain it to your boss, like how did you prep for that conversation?
Well, I'm really lucky that I've worked at the company that I'm at for 2.5 years. And so I, at this point, have worked really closely both with my boss, my supervisor, and then also with the CMO because I used to report directly to him before he got promoted up. And so that was nice that it wasn't like intimidating to walk into the C suite and explain, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking and why. And my boss also, because of the nature of my pregnancy loss and like all of the complications leading up to it, she was like one of the very first people who knew I was pregnant out of necessity because I needed so much flexibility. And so I feel like she also knew the journey that Emilio and I had been on over the past several months. And when I kind of walked her through, here are all the motives this is what we're thinking. I feel like a lot of people have kind of taken the approach of that's not what I would do, but I can see why you're making that decision. I support
Mhm.
you in it. And we felt like a lot of support through the process. It has taken a lot of like explaining. It has taken, I think it's hard for my work to understand like, wait, well, where are you going to be? Like, what's your permanent address? It's like, well, every 3 months it'll change. And so it's just taken like putting some things in writing and being really proactive in my communication up front. But everyone's been great and we're excited and it's been nice too. I would recommend to anyone who wants to go on a similar journey, if you are working remote, just make sure even if your company is remote, there might be certain areas where you can't work from. And so just make sure that you're really clear on that before you commit to different contracts and places. So it's taken some like technical things like that of just communicating, but overall it's been really positive.
Well, no matter what, we support you. And I
Mhm.
think we've all kind of said this in our own ways, but we think it's really amazing that you took stock of your situation, decided to pivot, develop a bold strategy to tackle the debt, and then give yourself a timeline. Like, this is a year of our lives where we're just going to make radical changes. And those words that you picked out earlier in the show of intentional, radical, then what was the other one? Anyway, they apply.
Controlled.
Controlled. They apply. And I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I know that like any millennials who have any kind of debt, I know that it feels like the cards are stacked against you, but I feel like that's a part of why a podcast like this and conversations like these are so important because sometimes you kind of have to break the rules to get ahead and to set
Oof.
yourself up. And it's cool to have a space where people can talk about that in a judgment-free zone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're just so thankful that you came on and shared your story, shared your future plans. I think it's so impactful in exactly what you were saying of like, just because things are supposed to be quote unquote done a certain way doesn't mean that they have to be. And the fact that like we can be creative with many things in our lives, finances included, housing included, it doesn't have to fit into any certain mold. And so I just commend you and your husband for being like, fuck that. We're just going to do this instead. And it's going to be good for us.
Yeah.
Thank
And I
Yeah.
you.
think we're going to need you back on the show for updates this year because we want to hear about how you're
Absolutely.
doing.
I'd love to give updates. I don't know where I'll be calling in from, but
Ooh, TBD. That's the mystery of it. That's the
TBD.
fun.
It really is. But I'd be happy to call in.
She's calling in from Michael, Illinois.
Please, only.
Yes.
Doug, Nebraska.
Yes. Doug, Nebraska is crazy.
Doug, Nebraska. Wow.
No, thank you so much, Sierra, for coming on the show. And this has been a delight. You're such a delight.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we will be back next week with a new episode. We love you all. Stay safe and bye.
Bye.
Bye.